We wasted
Okay.
quite a few minutes.
What is that for?
What's the subject this time? How to get across rivers?
No.
It's so confusing. You lose everything, and then you just bring it back.
Okay. So
I should have lost more.
today we're going to be learning about Ivan the Terrible.
No, I should have lost more pieces, cause.
What do you mean you should have lost more pieces? I would have given me more pieces.
No, I mean I should have
Taken?
Yeah.
Eaten? Killed?
captured. At least something where you need other pieces.
Yeah, you eat.
Yeah, no.
That's the verb you use.
Oh, you capture. Usually just capture. That's how all the high level chess players say they capture. So, starting with the first question. What is the importance of religion in kingdoms?
I don't know. You tell me. You're the historian, right?
I'm asking you guys.
Well, it is a divine right of the rulers, because they were chosen by God.
Yeah. That is correct. So yeah, it is generally that they are chosen by God. Which is part of the reason why everyone in Napoleon, because he was a self-proclaimed king and emperor of France, where he was not appointed by the church or given divineness by the church. Whereas many kings, queens, emperors are. So yeah, let us begin with the introduction. Just kind of going over what we're going to learn about this lesson. We're going to learn about Ivan the Terrible's ascension to power, as well as how he was as a ruler and his effects.
Here for the picture. Limited time though. I
We
need to
didn't take
work.
the photo.
Oh, okay. I have to go because I have work to do.
Okay.
I didn't. I'm sorry.
Okay, the next week.
Next week I will be here.
Okay.
Are we taking it next week?
What is stressing you out? What is?
Some kind of work. And of course we'll go over his sons and heirs, because he actually had a lot of sons. But of course, before anything, let us learn about background history of Russia leading up to the point of Ivan IV or Ivan the Terrible. So, let's start off with the Kievers. So I will say, I should have said earlier, I left my notes at home. So, from what I remember, it might be incorrect, but I'm positive it isn't. But the Kievan Rus were Scandinavian Vikings who had ventured east through the Balkans and kind of settled in rivers and forests in Russia and have extended down to Kiev, which is why they're called the Kievan Rus. And they, again, were mostly on rivers, and they were known for their trade of furs, wax, and slaves between the Byzantine Empire and the rest of Scandinavia.
Well, apparently, like the rulers were Vikings, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, and then also here was kind of I believe like you're bringing a combination of Slavic cultures. But okay, so I'm talking about Venice. I'll leave that out because I'm not sure. Okay, but after that came the Mongol invasion from 1223. Of course, when the Mongols invaded, we talked about Genghis Khan. Where they were invaded by the most western sub-state of all the Mongols, the Golden Horde, which at this point the Mongols were so huge they had divided themselves into 4 different kingdoms to better manage, I imagine. And basically, Russia was defeated and came under vassalage to the Mongols. Of course, Russia wasn't entirely this giant big country as it was Russia now. There are many different duchies and not duchies, but like some kind of kingdoms, I'm pretty sure. So each would have, of course, be vassal, pay tribute for protection from the Golden Horde, but which they're actually given surprisingly a lot of liberty and freedom to their rule over the land, but to act more as a deputy to the Khan's rule.
You had to pay taxes. and
Yeah.
tribute.
Yeah, I did. That's right. So I mentioned. And also we should talk about the Grand Duchy of Moscow, which was founded in 1238, and they were very successful because well, they were in a densely, the area was of a lot of dense forest and marshland, but also the Turkic people or Turkic, the Ottoman Empire soon began, and they raided the southern areas of Russia. So all those people from that would have gathered around Kiev had decided, some of them started to move up north to where it was safer. Which is part of the reason Moscow was successful. But another part was how cooperative they were with the Mongols in that. Yeah. So, moving on, what it was that, this is why I needed my notes. But it was, once it was seen that Mom was weak and the Moscovians had decided to rebel at the right time, to which they had gained their freedom and many other Russian duchies and states had as well. Which this was the beginning of one of those battles of kind of gaining freedom from them. And so yes, there was the Grand Duchy of Moscow, which was founded within a territory called Vladimir, which it later had absorbed. But moving on to the man himself, Ivan IV Vasilievich. Excuse my Russian pronunciation. I'm sure Nikita, you could help me on these. Vasilievich. Okay. So, basically what he had done, he had established the Tsardom of Russia, also which is similar to a kingdom. Of course, Tsardom, he became the first Tsar of Russia, and he had more formed a centralized state for Russia rather than all these little different duchies and places. And it was attributed to him that he transformed Russia from a more medieval state to kind of an empire and more modern European style state. So moving into his early life, he was born to Vasily III, son of Ivan III, also known as Ivan the Great. Vasily III was the Grand Prince of the Grand Duchy of Moscow. But at the age of 3, Vasily III died due to an infection, and Ivan became the Grand Prince at that said age. But it was that his mother had run it in his name until a few years later, when she also died. And so, of course, as the story goes with any young monarch whose parents had died, and this little child left to reign over this land, there's a lot of factionalism to rise to power, for Moscow. All the lords and aristocrats just tried to fight for the power that Ivan IV had. And so because of this, Ivan IV representing all these nobles and these upper class people. But very soon after, when he was 16, he was crowned Tsar of all Russians by the Cathedral of the Dominion, as they were called. Basically, the kind of church of Russia, more or less, for the Eastern Orthodox area. And he was called the Tsar, mostly from the Latin word Caesar, but also because Ivan III, Ivan the Great, had called himself a Tsar in his letters to other people. And with this declaration of Tsar of all Russians, it solidified his divine power because he was chosen by God, or said so, the cathedral of the Dominion. He was given such things such as Monomax cap, which is this. And so now as Tsar, he had some very early reforms to Russia. He had reorganized the central and local government, as well as strengthened and systemized the church, and also reformed the military and command structure, where one of his biggest changes in that was that officers and generals were not promoted to that position because of their family standing, but because of their merit and action and training or battle. So moving on towards more of the reign of Ivan, where soon after, when he was still young, he had suffered a believed fatal illness. He was so sick, people thought he would die, and no one believed he would survive. And so he had, when he was on his presumed deathbed, he had asked for all the nobles, also known as boyars, to trust his son at the time, who was an infant, as heir and to protect him. To which they not so politely declined and decided not to do that and to follow his vow. And so when Ivan actually returned to health and had healed, he had this now even deeper distrust in the boyars who had earlier betrayed him. And so it was believed this also had shaped his personality towards them. And which, when he got better, ultimately led to a lot of reprisals and assassinations of boyars and aristocrats. So, moving on to something called Oprichnina. I'm not sure how to pronounce this. Nikita, how do you pronounce this?
Oprichnina?
Oprichnina, okay. So it was man they called the Oprichnina, where it was preceded by a series of droughts, famines, and also treasons where nobles where there's one noble who had defected and joined the Lithuanians in a war against Russia and led an army to then massacre lots of the countryside and villages. There's one example of some of the treasons. And so because of this, Ivan abdicated or notified with 2 letters to a council of boyars that he has abdicated the throne because of more alleged treason in the clergy and royals. And based on the kind of governmental structure, these boyars could not make any reforms or changes and decisions without Ivan or the Tsar. So they were basically left at the mercy of the Russian people, who would very likely revolt and fight against the government, who legally could not do anything. So they begged him to come back. He said he'd only come back after he was given absolute power to make any decision he wants without having to consult or have the permission from the council. To which they had agreed, and so he came back as the Tsar again. And so with that came the Oprichnina, which was interestingly a kind of sub-state of Russia that he had complete control over, and the boyars had a different state, I forgot exactly what it's called, but that they also ruled. And so Ivan the Terrible didn't have absolute power over Russia, but he had absolute power over Oprichnina, which was a very significant part of Russia at the time. And he had organized the Oprichniki, which were very similar to kind of in feudalism the lords, like in feudal medieval Europe, the lords over the peasants, kind of like the landlords who would kind of own them, similar to serfs. But here, they were basically, they were never held responsible to anything and had free reign over what they did. So there were many consequences, such as like having the peasants pay as much as they like, which was said to be 10 times, or not 10 times, it'd be said that they paid 1 year's worth of pay that before they have to pay 10 years. So it increased quite significantly. And this was also the kind of royal guard for Ivan. Yeah, they were not held responsible. They could kind of do whatever they'd like as royal guard, and many nobles were. Later when I talk about this next time, I'm going to talk about the Novgorod massacre. But in that, many nobles were, I guess, lack of another word, kind of approached by these oprisnikis, and they were either killed, expelled, or were recruited into them. Which is interesting. But so moving on to the massacre of Novgorod, it was also preceded by a 1570 epidemic, killing thousands in Novgorod. This also was happening during the Livonian War. And so while at war, Ivan was notified and suspected noble treason in Novgorod. So him and the Osmaniki had gone to the town and basically massacred everybody. The death toll has huge ranges based on different sources. Some say it was 20,000 deaths, but the one I think might be most realistic was this one that estimated 2,000 to 3,000 deaths. This reasoning was after the epidemic, no more than 10,000 people could have been living in Novgorod, so this was about how many deaths there were. And the way he had killed them was he tied them to horse-drawn sleds, I think it was, on the back of them, not onto the front, like dragging from behind, and run them through freezing rivers. I think it was until they confessed, died of hypothermia, or drowned.
Ivan did that?
Yeah.
That's terrible.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot to start this off, but there was this modern meaning of terrible as in like, really bad. But again, he didn't mention this before, but it's more of like very strict. And then in the old sense at this time, him being terrible was more of like he kept all the peasants and all the people he governed in check, while also putting fear into the enemies of the state, like other countries he's at war with, striking fear into them. So yeah, not actually terrible, but strict and terrifying. He also had fought quite a few notable wars. Early on, he fought some eastern, some Mongol states to secure the Volga, which is a really large, also important river in Russia, just east of where they currently were residing, kind of the Moscow, Russia area. It's interesting because he had to make sure with the Golden Horde that they would not intervene, in which they did not, so he was able to secure that. And right after they secured the Volga, there came the Russo-Turkish War from 1568 to 1570, where the Turkish, or the Ottoman Empire, actually wanted the Volga to build a canal to improve their navy. And so they had initiated and invaded the area and attacked the fort. Ultimately, the Turks lost, and this started a centuries-long rivalry between the two. Although they did meet an agreement, even though Ottoman Empire lost. Well, one, they damaged the fort, and also second, they got a deal to allow Muslim pilgrims and trade to move through the area. So I guess that's nice for the Turks, that is. Also the Livonian War, we talked a little bit about the Novgorod massacre. It was basically when Ivan the Terrible, because at the time, of course, Russia was landlocked, and so Livonia, which was basically a country, was both modern-day Latvia and modern-day Lithuania. And so Ivan saw them as I guess, a target to be able to open up into the Baltic Sea, so declared war, and had successfully taken over the modern day Latvia territory. But it was Lithuania who joined the Poles into the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, kind of as one state. They just merged together. And between the Poles, Lithuanians, even the Swedes and Danes decided to get involved as well to prevent this mass expansion of Russia. Not mass expansion, just this expansion westward of Russia. And so they did. And then he also started the conquest for Siberia, kind of giving nobles and settlers permission and money to basically go out there and settle land for Russia, which continued until 1778, from what I saw. Yeah, moving on to his marriages and sons. He actually had 6 wives, at least 6 wives whose existence is not contested. If you do count the 2 who are contested, if they either exist or not, then 8. And he also had 9 sons in total. I think it was 7 who was with 1 wife. But one of his sons, Tsar Fyodor I of Russia, was to become the heir for Ivan the Terrible. But he had a previous heir, Tsarevich Ivan Ivanich. All of their first names led with Tsarevich. So Ivan Ivanovich was his more distinct name, so he named it after himself. That would have been, I guess, Ivan V. But unfortunately, this would be the would-be heir. But Ivan IV had struck him fatally in the head in a fit of rage and killed him, which I found this game, which I thought was a very good game.
And apparently they don't know if it actually happened or not.
No. I find it interesting, like, the lines of rugs. It's like a stereotype that Russians put rugs on the walls as the decoration. Maybe it's like this is really long tradition.
Well, it's also, it's kind of like it insulates. I think it's warm. And also it's like an Eastern thing, I think, from influence, like, in Persia they put rugs everywhere.
Right. But yeah, so it was said after Ivan Ivanich's death, Russia was left with no competent heir, which was, I think, partially true because it was said Tsar Fyodor I of Russia had a lack of interest in politics, so he really didn't care to govern for Russia, and so his brother-in-law, which was the brother of his actual wife, Boris Godunov, had basically ruled in the name of Tsar Fyodor I. And once Boris died, no one was really there to lead the country effectively, and so it turned into the time of troubles with political confusion and really just lack of form.
I brought Lucas.
Whoa.
Oh.
I'm here. I'm
Ready
tagging
again?
along.
We're
Well.
just going over the bibliography.
Lucas, you made it just in time for my sources.
Damn.
We
don't have that- we don't have an next one. It's
Bible story.
Well, the week after next.
Oh
my god. I'll figure it out.
Good morning.
How far away was Ivan IV to like Peter the Great, the first one?
The great Ivan IV.
Peter the Great was like,
Was that much later?
that was like 1670s to 1720s. So he was like, Ivan's death was probably
Oh, can I pitch an
100
idea?
100 years to 60 years.
Damn.
You have to put in the Discord.
Oh.
Yeah, dude. Put it in the
My bad.
Discord.
No,
Well, I'm just saying, you're on the topic of like tyrannical leaders. Do
Yourself, Lucas.
Vlad Dracula.
Vlad Dracula?
Yeah.
Was he a leader?
Yeah, he was
Vlad the Impaler.
the
Oh,
Impaler.
okay. Oh yeah, Vlad the Impaler.
What are your thoughts on other people leading meetings of their own thoughts?
His name wasn't actually.
I've been thinking that because
Yeah, no,
I
it
need a
was
break
Dracula,
sometimes.
I'll do it.
which means
I'll do
son
it.
of the dragon, because
Nice.
his,
It was.
because,
My vote
yeah, no, because his
is
father was
during the
called
Cold War.
Dracul,
Okay.
which is
Who's
the
Catherine the
dragon.
Great?
So you
Catherine
were
the Great. She came right after like
son of
Peter the Great.
Who is Peter the Great though?
Her husband.
But who's Catherine the Great?
Well, one of the Peters.
But who
Thanks,
is
Magnus.
she?
Yeah.
She ruled Russia. She's German.
That's an
She's
actual thing.
German.
She's
I
German.
swear.
She was, so there's Peter the
Well,
Great,
I'm
and then
so-
he had a son named Peter the Great. And that Peter the Great was married to Catherine the Great.
Yeah.
I
Alright.
watched the TV show.
So.
I'll do Catherine, right?
I'll do Catherine.
Raise your hand for Catherine the Great. Is that a hand for Catherine the Great?
I count two.
I got
You
three.
don't count for two.
Oh, you count as two.
No,
I
he
count as
doesn't.
two. Yeah, no, I literally count as two.
Why?
Because I say so.
No.
You can be counted as 0 because you didn't even make the meeting.
Damn, that's, no, no,
You
no.
never come. What is wrong with you?
And Nikita, what's your vote?
What
It
if
doesn't
he's
matter what he
spying?
votes.
What do you spying? Okay.
Oh.
What if you're spying?
Noah.
Okay. Alright, so we'll do Catherine the Great next, and then
No.
have this be another political topic.
Okay.
Sadly, this is gonna be tossed into oblivion.
Damn.
We should
Nobody
keep it
gives
around.
a shit about Eastern philosophy.
Well, we already did it. This is like,
Oh.
this is part 2.
Well, okay.
You did Greek philosophy, not ancient Eastern.
Oh.
Oh.
Right. Alright.
Is it
Like I can
warm?
split this.
Oh yeah, it's a little one.
Is it
Magnus,
real
can I
warm?
leave a meeting at some